In the spotlight today, the Maserati MC12. This is based on a Ferrari Enzo, but it's better. Why? Well, hold on. I'm gonna bring you nice information. Okay, all right. On this board are several universal truths in the automotive world. The first one is that Enzo Ferrari is God. You don't actually have to believe that, and please don't let your personal God be offended. But the second one is not up for discussion at all, and it's all homologation cars are better than all regular cars, and that's all there is to it. Well, this is a homologation race car version of the Enzo. Think about that for a second. This is the homologation race version, therefore the better version of the car that was named after God. I mean, tell me how it's gonna get any better than that.
The MC12 raced a lot. It won nearly as often as it raced, enough to win 14 championship titles, including 3 Manufacturers' Cups.
This is a very big win and a very important win for the team.
For one of those in 2005, it beat its next closest competitor with nearly twice as many points. That competitor was Ferrari. And this is the homologation street car built just so the racing could happen. 50 road cars were built, called MC12 for Maserati Corse, for Maserati Racing, and 12 cylinders. An additional 12 track-only Versione Corse, or racing versions, were built, making total production of the MC12 just 62 units. By comparison, Ferrari made 400 Enzos. The Enzo was not only more common, it was slower. The MC12 beat the Enzo by a 10th around Top Gear's track and by a 2nd around the Nürburgring. It set production car lap records at both tracks.
That is all the more impressive given the elephant in the room, and that's the way of saying something's really big. That thing is enormous. Let's put it in perspective here. It is as long as a Bentley Bentayga, even though it only has a wheelbase as short as a BMW 3 Series. And then it's wide. It is as wide as an AMG G-Class 6x6, or in other words, 2 inches wider than a Chevy Suburban. And then it's only as tall as a Mazda Miata with 4 flat tires on it. I mean, it's not only huge, but the proportions are insane.
It may be huge, but it's not heavy. Its dry weight of 3,150 pounds is made possible by a carbon fiber and Nomex honeycomb sandwich monocoque. Aluminum front and rear subframes carry double wishbone suspension with pushrod-actuated fixed bogie coilover shocks. The Enzo was the first road car ever to have carbon ceramic brakes, but the MC12 had conventional steel Brembos and center lock wheels. The MC12 has a modified version of the 65-degree Ferrari F140 V-12 that made its debut in the Enzo. It has the same 6-liter displacement, titanium connecting rods, and 4 valves per cylinder. But instead of a chain driving the 4 cams, Maserati switched to a gear drive. Gears are louder, but they're stronger, and this, don't forget, was a race car. Redlined at just 7,500 RPM, it was rated at slightly less power than the Enzo, but with almost 100 pounds less to carry around than the Ferrari, 630 horsepower was probably enough, as was 481 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 was yours in 3.7 seconds. The quarter mile screamed by in 11.8 at 124, and top speed was 205 miles an hour.
Being a Ferrari from the mid-2000s, it has a single-clutch automated manual. Ferrari called it the F1, Maserati called it a Cambio Corsa, and I call it a shame, because frankly, that's the one part of this car that ages it more than anything else. But at least the shift paddles are on the column, as God and Enzo intended. The rest of the interior, well, there's not much to this, but that's fine. It's how it's supposed to be. I mean, there's not even a rear view mirror because there's no rear view. There's no window back there. And what would be the point of looking back and seeing the intake snorkel? Actually, that'd be kind of cool. But this is a race car, and it has everything you need and nothing you don't. The driving position is absolutely perfect. It has 4-point harnesses that replace the 3-point regular belts because race car, and everything is blue because Maserati.
While there's some exposed gel-coated carbon fiber, Maserati chose a silver lame open-weave cloth called Britex for the interior. This was to be reminiscent of carbon without looking cheap and tacky. The MC12 had no radio because why on earth would you want to drown out the sound of a Ferrari V12? Besides, the iPod had already been invented when this car was in production. If you wanted music, you got out and danced around the car like a normal person. Oh, and by the way, those doors open conventionally, no butterfly doors like the Enzo has, but that's because the MC12's roof comes off. Yes, it's a homologation convertible Enzo.
Open air is a good thing because, and I know you probably don't want to hear this, inside the MC12 doesn't actually sound that good. It sounds much better outside. And while I'm being honest, let me say that the 7,500 RPM V12 in here has nothing acoustically on the 9,000 RPM version of that engine in the 812 Superfast. I guess that's 15 years of progress. However, you can pull the roof off, which means you can listen to the intake and the exhaust outside, something you can't do in an Enzo, and trust me, you want to do that.
The MC12 came in precisely one color, well, technically two. It's an incredible pearl white and a Maserati blue two-tone. Hopefully the pearl effect comes across in your little phone screen because in person, this paint is stunning.
Let's be honest about one thing. If you want an MC12, it's probably because of how it looks. The thing was sculpted as a joint effort between the wind tunnel and Frank Stephenson. Now, Frank is responsible for many of today's really beautiful cars, including the perfectly proportioned first-generation BMW X5, the perfectly retro minimalist Mini Cooper and the Fiat Cinquecento, and let's not forget the supercars, the Ferrari F430 and the FXX, and all of the beautiful McLarens, especially the long-tail ones. Do you see where that maybe came from? Frank is, how do I say this? Frank is crazy. No, Frank is out of his tree. Frank should be put in a straitjacket and locked up at night. But I say that with all of the love and admiration in the world. The man is a genius, but only a lunatic could come up with a shape like that.
Aerodynamics were really the boss here, no surprise given the rear wing is 6.5 feet wide. It produced enough downforce to change the weight distribution by 7 points at 125 miles an hour. The strakes in the air intakes aren't just the most visually impressive angle of the car, but they stopped small children from being sucked into the cooling ducts. The side profile is dominated by the squared-off horizontal shelf of a shoulder line that swoops up and down again. It's not actually all that different from a Ferrari Testarossa in its contour. There are vents and intakes everywhere, including at the top of the fenders, the engine cover, and an upside-down smiley face at the rear right above the enormous twin actual diffusers. The lighting looks, well, like an afterthought with round lenses and reflectors seemingly randomly placed everywhere, including in the blue-painted headlight buckets.
The MC12 is not a practical vehicle, at least so far as cargo is concerned, unless I guess you take off the entire front clamshell, but let's be honest, no race car ever needs to take a suitcase. All of this stuff is secondary anyway, because once your team of mechanics reassembles the front of the car, well then you take it for a drive, and that's what this thing is about anyway. It's an easy car to drive. I mean, other than the fact that the overhang is just so long and low that you gotta watch it and make sure it doesn't scrape everywhere, even with the front end lift system active. It's an easy car to drive. It's got really good visibility forward, and actually the mirrors are good, so you don't miss all that much behind you. Plus, 630 horsepower, you can just get rid of anyone. It rides really well, and it's a good driver's car in that it just does what you ask it to do, which means the steering is linear, the brakes work great, they're wooden in the way that Ferraris of this era were, but the whole car just works as a whole, and it masks speed ridiculously. And it's not actually that loud inside the car. You could really catch yourself doing bad things. And the engine, well, it's a Ferrari V12. You decide for yourself. Take a listen to what this thing sounds like on the road.
The MC12 has all the right ingredients, but the headline is that it's a Ferrari Enzo underneath. Nothing more really needs to be said. Except that Ferrari never raced the Enzo, Maserati did. And its success puts the MC12 in rarefied air with other GT1 homologation cars, like the Mercedes CLK GTR, the Porsche 911 GT1, and of course the McLaren F1 GTR. Mind you, the McLaren F1 is a lot more common. 106 of those things were made, and 400 Enzos? they're practically Corollas by comparison. Look closely because with only 62 ever made, the MC12 might be the rarest car we ever put in the spotlight.